And at the end, Shailaja will ask you to unmute yourself and start your videos. Please stop your videos yourself so you can start it on.
Sujata, I'm just putting in the topic and all that stuff.
Yes.
You can, anything else you generally want to say, you can say.
Yes. Everybody will be on mute and stop video throughout the session. Please mute yourselves, people. Members, please mute yourselves.
I'm also sharing the Duchess Club members page. We're going live now. Error while starting broadcast. Please try. Sujata, I'm getting errors.
No, it should be able to start it.
I'm getting error message.
Try again.
I've tried 4 times now. It's not, so we'll still have the recording. So,
okay, fine.
So I'm not getting it. Kiran, are you recording it? I'll try it in between, but
yes, ma'am. Recording, ma'am.
Okay, super. Anu Agarwal?
Yeah.
Can start.
But people are still joining.
That's okay.
So about 65 have come in.
It's fine, Anu.
Okay. You want to start?
Yes, Anu, can you start?
Hi, friends. Good morning and welcome to all the Duchess members and all the friends who have joined us outstation. A very warm welcome to Sabita ma'am to the Duchess Club virtual meeting on Zoom. Month of August is action-packed. Last Saturday, we had Abhishek, the stand-up comedian, in conversation with Asha Sampat. The meeting was well attended. Tomorrow, 15th August, we have Shobha Varthaman and Shailaja with some interesting and informative interaction. Tomorrow's meeting is brought to you by Cinema Rendezvous in association with Duchess Club. On 24th August, we celebrate Nama Chennai with Sushi Natraj. So friends and members, please mark the dates. We are really packed this month. Today, we have Sabita Radhakrishnan in conversation with Sujata Mundra, celebrating the Handloom Day as she weaves her extraordinary journey in textiles and textures. And today's meeting is sponsored by Go Ed Digital and Go Ed Travel and Forests. And we thank our sponsors for the same. Shailaja, can we have the slides running?
Sure. Give me a minute. Yes, Anu, done with the sponsors.
So much to our sponsors, and over to Shailaja now.
Yes, can we have Kala? Kala, can you raise your hand wherever you are? Can Anu or Sujata, if you spot her, unmute her? Kala Ashok?
Yeah, she's there.
Unmuted? 1 second, I found her, yeah.
Yeah, unmute. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we can hear you.
My video is also on.
Spotlighting. Okay. You can start while I'll share your, you wanted me to share the lyrics, right? I'll do that. But you can start.
Okay. Namaskaram, one and all, and welcome to Sabita Madam. I'll sing a song, patriotic song this morning. Jayati Jayati Bharat Mata Buddha Gita Jayati Jayati Bharat Mata Buddha Gita Nikila Mata Vananirata Natajana Suhita Jayati 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 सकल जीव समता साधु साधु विदिता सकल जीव समता साधु साधु विदिता अखिल लोक पठिता परमानंद समुदिता अखिल लोक प्रदिता परमानंद समुदिता जयति जयति भारत माता बुध गीता निखिल मता पन निरता नट जन सुहिता जयति 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 अगणित गुणशीला अति दयाल वाला अगणित गुणशीला अति दयाल वाला प्रकटित शुभ चाला पतित प्राण लोला प्रकटित शुभ चाला पतित प्राण लोला जयति जयति भारत माता बुध गीता जयति जयति भारत माता बुध गीता निखिल मता वन निरता नट जन सुहिता जयति 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 वंदे मातरम
Vande Mataram. Kala, that was beautiful. Thank you so much. Next,
you.
can we have, can we unmute Nina, please? Nina, can you raise your hand? Suj, if you find her, just unmute her.
Yes, I have.
Yes. Nina?
Yes.
Spotlight, yes.
Good morning and namaskaram to everyone, especially to my guru, Kala. That was beautiful, ma. Fantastic. You set the right tone for the meeting for today, Kala. And just for everyone else to know, Kala is my guru for bhajans, and then I've been spending the last 3 months learning some divine bhajans. So thank you, Kala, for it. We go on to thank Shailaja, my guide and my best critic, right? She's the techie of the Duchess Club, and I think today she is the technical support for it. Thank you, Shailaja, for always being there for the Duchess. You're precious.
Pleasure. Pleasure, Nina. Thank you.
Okay, before I talk about Sabita, I would like to talk about Sujata, our friend. I would like to introduce her And this is the first time I'm introducing her. So here I go, guys. This is my perspective of how I look at her. When Sujata turned 50, I had a tagline for her, and that was Suj rocks. That's how I look at her. She can sing, she can dance, she can cook, she can run, she can swim, she can cycle, she can create magic with decorations, and she can teach Hindi brilliantly. And she's really best at a camera and the computer. She's a great mom, a fantastic daughter, and a dream daughter-in-law. An unbelievable wife, and an awesome teammate, and a great friend for all of us here. She's a no-nonsense woman of today who is a winner in every way. When I met her around 22 years back, what drew me to her was her efficiency, hard work, determination, yet a kind, cheerful, daring, beautiful woman whose best feature is her gorgeous smile. I'm sure all of you agree on that. Like they say, opposites attract. I can dream, she can execute. I can learn, she can teach. I can be skillful, but she is naturally talented. I can lead, and she can manage beautifully. I am cool, and she is hot. I think from my heart, and she works from her heart and her head. We both love life, live life fully, and enjoy whatever we do completely. I'm crazy, but she's mad too. Together, Suj and I can create magic. Cheers and hugs and love to my dearest buddy. And I thank God for this gift of friendship, Sujata. Love you, Suj. You truly rock.
Thank you, Nina. So many words.
And that's only half, right? Okay, there's much more to you. I forgot to mention that we're also the best of beer buddies. Okay, now I go on to Sabita. Thank you very much for coming in this morning. It was a very casual call that you made the other day, and I think I just roped you into it. But I know you've been very busy the last couple of days. You have the next 24 hours also very, very busy, but thank you for obliging me. I remember the time when I met Sabita, I think it was more than 30 years back when I would go to her boutique, Amrapali boutique at Fountain Plaza, and I would admire this beautiful, elegant, composed woman who would be managing the place. I did not know her. I would just go buy my stuff and I would go with my mother-in-law. But I would admire what she was selling and I would admire her as a person. Fast forward to 30 years later, she had gone through a lot of challenges and even had the wall. What I saw much later when we were in Savera again was a very composed, much more serene and much more beautiful Sabita. I learned that apart from her business, she has also moved on to, she was already a very cook. And then 10 years back, she started a very beautiful organization called Udavi, and that's when I met her. And once a year, I try to help her out by calling her group of friends and everyone at Udavi to just have a nice meal and a nice evening at Savera. That's all I do for her. So thank you, Sabita, for being here this morning. And we're really, really looking forward to this morning. But I must tell you, Sabita, one more thing. She's one person who made me a judge for a cookery contest. She did not know that I cannot cook. So that's Sabita for you. And thank you so much, Sabita, for being here this morning.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And you're always so extravagant in what you say about people. And I think we all love you because we know that it's genuine. And I must thank you, Nina, and all the lovely ladies of Duchess Club for inviting me here today. I always like to share my journey so that other people also, you know, try to travel on the same route. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabita.
Thank you, Nina. I'm just going to request all the friends here. So there are people who are getting booted out and coming back in. There are broadband issues and stuff. So when you find somebody coming in like Rajam Subramaniam just came in, you can message her, or if you're a friend, you can just call her to switch off the video, because let's henceforth remember, as soon whenever we come in, we switch off the video if the meeting is proceeding. Rajam, if possible, try and switch off the video. Over to Sujata and Sabita Radhakrishnan now.
Thank you, Shailaja. Thank you, Nina, for all the kind words. Thank you so much. Welcome, Ms. Sabita Radhakrishnan, to our Duchess Club. Sabita is a freelance writer, columnist, foodie, broadcaster, playwright, textile designer, craft activist, author, and founder of Udhavi. Ma'am has done so much. She has hands-on experience with textiles for almost 4 decades. She was the first to introduce the concept of the mismatched blouses, motifs on sleeves and back, and blouse pieces with woven borders. Sabita ma'am, you are indeed a trendsetter. And it's indeed my honor to be in conversation with you today, ma'am, Doyen of Indian textile heritage. How did it all begin, ma'am, more than 30 years ago? And how did you prove that age is no bar for doing things? Please share your journey, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sujata, for all the lovely things you've said about me. And I should live up to all your expectations, right? Yeah. So your question was 30 years ago. Amrapali was started in 1977, really. And before that, I was involved with another shop. And I found that in Chennai, there weren't many exclusive shops at all. So I wanted to be different. So I went around trying to get people to weave saris, cotton saris. And I won't be wrong if I say that I introduced the concept of cottons in Chennai, because people in Andhra and Kerala wore cottons, but Chennai, they were either wearing silks or they were wearing synthetics. So this was something awesome to most people. And there was another shop, Varnali, and I always respect them for their beautiful Venkatgiris. But then Andhra people are used to wearing cottons. So that's how I started my journey. I used to go around locating printers, locating weavers, and finally I established my own printing unit. And I didn't want anything to be just a shop. I wanted it to be different. So I started scoring the city, and I used to travel outside. I used to get material for printing, and this hand block printing always fascinated me. Then I started designing silver jewelry and accessories and so on. But later I started focusing only on textiles. That's how the journey began.
Yes, ma'am. And ma'am, how are you helping and supporting the weavers and clusters to design and market their craft?
Okay.
After starting Amrapali?
Yeah, that was much later. Amrapali, I closed down, say 20, 21 years ago. After my daughter passed away, I just couldn't. I said I should be done with doing anything commercial. But then, you know me, I just can't keep off textiles. So it was sort of therapeutic to work with the weavers. Of course, a year of isolation was there. And then later I started locating all the weavers who were in trouble, who needed help. And the market is a very changing market, you know, and the weavers have set minds. They have a set mindset. And in the sense, they don't really, they are not amenable to change. They want to stick to the old routine. So because I work closely with them, and in these 45 years, I've traveled across the country and literally sat down on the ground with them, eaten with them, they sort of felt a sense of kinship. So they sort of listened to me. Otherwise, they're always up in arms at these ladies who come in big cars and they sort of dump designs on you and then they forget you. Because we should always remember that they should have a sustainable livelihood. So what happened is I began mentoring the weavers, and they used to come and sit in my office room and bring all the material, and we used to sit there with color coding and so on. I taught them about color first, you know, the color. In the old days, it was natural dyes. So a combination would never go wrong. But with the advent of chemical dyes, when it stormed the market, it was so tempting to, you know, combine shocking pink with bright purple and so on. So I taught them that muted shades are also good. Then we went on to innovating designs with their help, because you had to remember that each one is an artist. You know, you can't just shove anything down their throats. So we worked together in tandem. And then what emerged was something truly gratifying. Yeah. And sorry, your question was, how am I helping them?
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
the first thing that I did was to help them in marketing, because they don't know how to market. Because in the old days, it was automatic. Everyone bought stuff. The shops bought stuff. Later, they began to be picky. So I had to find new markets for them. I would kind of help them hold exhibitions outside Chennai. Because in Chennai, you know, the thing is always when you have something at home, you don't really value it. So they started selling in Delhi, Bombay, Pune. And later on, I'll talk about it later, I have more schemes for them in the COVID period.
So I think these kind of interventions have been effective for the revival of the traditional weaves, ma'am. Now, saris have defined the sartorial sense of Indian women. It is said that no other attire besides a sari can do full justice to the beauty of the Indian woman. So what would you like to say about this 9-yard romance, ma'am?
Oh, I think the sari is the most beautiful costume in the world. And even if we are in trousers, if we are in jeans, if you're in shorts, if you're in salwar kameezes, you just wear a sari and people say, wow. So I think it is the most beautiful costume because it hides a lot of sins. And women of any age, any size, any shape can still look beautiful in a sari. And some women would come to me and say, then the other person also has the same sari. But then it's your personality. You team it with a different blouse. You team it with different accessories like jewelry and so on. And you still are yourself and you are showing off your personality. And this 100 sari pact, I was very, very concerned that the sari would go into oblivion. But this 100 sari pact started by two women in Bangalore really brought out, you know, things in Facebook. Of course, I always say there's a lot of narcissism in Facebook. Everyone wore it and then you had to say how lovely. But then they realized that they could look beautiful in a sari. Then I started the 60 handloom pact, 60 sari handloom pact, which meant you wore handloom saris at least 60 times a year. And then we started the Kaitari, Sumita and I started that. And now it's got, I mean, it's gone places and people are taking the trouble to find out. But then what I tell my weavers is, you're talking about saris all the time, but start getting contemporary, start doing yardage with the traditional skills, start making scarves and stoles, you know, but still that mindset is there that you have to wear, you know, make saris.
Yes. So there is a culture, livelihood, fashion, and politics which are surrounding the sari. How did the sari come back into vogue, and especially, and how do we get it back in vogue in the northern states like Mumbai and Delhi, where people have almost forgotten wearing sari for occasions?
Can I tell you something, Shailaja? I mean, you're not shy. Sujata?
Yes,
we have forgotten in the South to wear a sari. Most people wear salwar suits and they say it's due to convenience, but then they wear very fashionable ones as well. And it's not that they are going to wear it at home only. So people in the north also have been affected by this 100 sari pact. I'm telling you, it has done wonders. And people even living abroad have started wearing saris.
yes, I think this went viral, ma'am.
Yes, it went viral. And I think it's a very good thing that happened. I mean, people first thought it was silly and, you know, uncalled for and so on. But it has helped. But I always wonder, you know, even when you say people have stopped wearing saris, why is it that every sari shop is packed when there's a festival? You go to T Nagar, you can't go there, you know, because of the crowds. I'm not talking about now. But which means you're still willing to sell. And I have friends in Canada who I expose them to all the beautiful saris, the diversity of designs that you find in India. And mind you, they are giving orders to the weavers. So I keep saying, how will you wear it in Canada? They say they just want to possess it and then they're buying it from Australia. And they do wear it on occasion. So now I no longer am afraid that the sari will go into
Will go out.
very,
Thank-
very much.
I think it's a fabulous culture and we should keep maintaining it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So temples have inspired weaving, ma'am. Why is it that the looms always abounded the temples, around the temples where they are? And how did the temple architecture affect the designs?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. And we are all tuned to tradition. And the weavers, the Vishnu temple had silk looms, the Shiva temples had cotton looms around them because the deities wore that silk and cotton accordingly. And the temple architecture is something fascinating, though we don't know the build. Look at the temple properly, not just outside saying it's so wondrous and so beautifully built. You will see so many motifs that have been absorbed into the saris, especially our Kanchipuram saris. You see the Annapakshi, then you see the Paisley, which is a perennial favorite. Then you see the Rudraksh. Then you see those tiny little wavy lines going down. And now recently they have implemented figures also into the sari, though I'm not gaga over that kind of thing. So temple, the weavers always look to the temples for inspiration, and all the traditional motifs have been drawn from them.
And ma'am, the handlooms are expensive and not affordable for all. So how do we change the mindset of people who could prioritize it and buy it? And even the weavers don't want their children to work in this profession anymore. How will this craft or weave continue?
See, this is a major concern for me, and people, craft and textile activists, because I think it all stems from the fact that we are not as proud of our culture and our textiles as the people living abroad. For instance, in Thailand, their silk, which is just plain silk, is so much advertised. They sell at the airport. And when you go as a tourist, you're shown the silk. And then you say, my God, Indian silks are so much better, but these people are raving over, this kind of silk. So I think the pride in tradition, pride of our cultural skills should be there. That is the main thing. Yeah. And what was the second part of your question?
The weavers don't want their children to work in this profession anymore. So how can this continue, the craft and the weave continue?
Okay, see, what is happening is they work in very poor conditions, poor lighting, and they sit in pit looms, and they are there all day. And one big room is dedicated to the loom. All life goes around that loom. So what happens is, since they are not being paid much, they get something like 5,000 or 6,000 for one sari, which is shared by 2-3 people if it's a Korwal sari. So they don't want their children to continue like this. They send them out and educate them. And then when they come back, they don't know. They are not at all sure of the loom. So they begin to abandon their craft and start going out. They are willing to be servers for weddings, and they are willing to sweep offices in the corporate firms, because the only fact is because they earn more. And that's a pity. And how do we circumvent this? We can circumvent this by, people who can write should write. We should do spot television shows now that, we are in control of technology. And that's the only way we can, advertise their skills. And creating awareness should be there. And it should start at school and college level. Here, I just want to say, Crafts Council of India, which I was very much a part of at one time, we had a scheme for scholarships for children of artisans. But one criteria is that they should learn craft also, the paramparic craft, and they should not abandon it. Otherwise, we won't give them the scholarship. And they are asked to send the products which they do. So you're ensuring education, and you're ensuring that they also are in touch with the craft.
I think this should become mandatory in all schools right from childhood, ma'am.
Yes, again, Crafts Council of India, some of my friends, they are doing this awareness in school, trying to teach the children, and they've got small little looms where the children get to weave things, and they exercise over it because they don't know that how material is created with the warp and the weft.
Yes.
Then you're asking me why handlooms, handlooms are expensive. Now the thing is, it's handcrafted, and especially the handloom cottons. The price, in a silk, it justifies. You're willing to spend, say, 50,000 or 20,000 bucks for a silk sari. But for a cotton sari, many people are reluctant to spend 3,500. It is because the wages are so low for a cotton sari. 500 as compared to 5,000 rupees. There's quite a difference.
Yes.
So they don't want to wear cotton. So what do? We give them higher wages. We give them higher wages, so the cost of the sari gets higher. But what I'm saying is, now it is sort of relegated to a niche clientele. Not everyone can afford handlooms, especially those done on a corvée style and things like that. But there are some of us hardcore people who will want that and wear it. But for the rest, they are going in for power loom, which are beautiful copies of handlooms, and very simple kind of sarees, which are affordable, even 600, 700.
So can we afford to lose our precious heritage of handlooms when you're comparing it to the power looms, ma'am, here?
No, we can't. We should not. Because this has gone back thousands of years ago. Excavations at Mohenjo-daro and Harappa showed looms, and it showed evidence that weaving was done thousands of years ago, 5th and 6th century. So we can't afford to let it lapse. Now we are documenting everything. And what I'm saying is, you can have museums which display these beautiful sarees, and there are a lot of women who are willing to acquire them. So, what I do is, sometimes it's a lone battle. So I try to write as much as I can on the different type of sarees to create the awareness. Now, the sari you put on is from Rukmani Deviji's wardrobe. So when I was working in Kalakshetra as a senior consultant, I used to see the sari very often, and the weavers we had there would struggle to weave the sari. Because for one, it's a korvai sari, and it's also got that malli muggu inside each block, each square, which makes it very difficult to weave. So now we are replicating all her sarees, and they are selling like hotcakes, because very few skilled weavers can weave.
Like, ma'am, when you're speaking about Rukmani Devi Arundel or Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay, they're the women who shaped India. So when they wore these saris, does it help in the public also wanting to buy these saris? Like MS Subbalakshmi, when she wore her blue Kanjivarams to the kacheris, the name came as MS Blue. So how does these celebrities, when they adorn these saris, how does this help in marketing also?
This definitely helps, because they become like brand ambassadors. And in fact, in one of my interviews with Jayalalitha, when I went to see her, she was quite friendly with me. So I used to say, everything about you is so nice and you're so smart and with it, but why don't you wear handloom saris? If you wore handloom saris, the handloom industry would benefit. Because for instance, Sonia and Indira Gandhi and all that, they wore these saris, and every sari of theirs was beautiful, and it was, depicted each state. It represented each state. And even now, Sonia wears those kind of saris. But Jayalalitha's answer was, but Samita, I'm so fat. If I wore cotton saris, I'd look like this. So I was trying to dissuade her and tell her that it can be sort of softened if you don't starch it much. But she said, no, you can't convert me. I'm very happy with my synthetic. And I was always saying that even today, you see, film stars shape our fashion destiny.
Yes, I think they are the new age models, ma'am.
Yeah. So I was thinking, like people like Shabana Azmi, Nandita Das. I've had the pleasure of having all these women come to my shows in Bombay. So I was thinking we should create an ambassador for handloom saris, because then they represent handlooms. They represent India, not just from South India, but from anywhere.
From India, yes, ma'am. And ma'am, you had taken the Duke and the Duchess of Wellington to Kanchipuram. along with you, and please share your experience how exhibiting this culture and tradition to the dignitaries also helped, ma'am.
Yes, what happened was actually I got a request from a tourist company to take the Duke and Duchess of Wellington to Kanchipuram. And I tried to get off that because my mother was not keeping well. But I got a call from London and said, you have to take us. We want you to come. So I tied up with the Weaver Service Center in Kanchipuram and got them to set up all the best creations they had. And it was a wonderful experience to me. The Duke was initially a little cold, you know, the British way of looking at things, and especially since I talked about what the British did to our handloom industry in India. I said, I'm sorry, but I have to talk about that. So, but later on he warmed up, and then he was so fascinated by all this. And here you can see him even draping this, you know, shawl over his shoulders, and he just wouldn't go. And every sari I showed them, I was telling them about the design and how it is done and so on. So they went back carrying very lovely memories because we had time to talk in the vehicle back home. And it was an experience that I'll never forget. Then I took them to the temples and showed them certain sculptures and carvings, and which had been incorporated in the saris. And then finally we went to an outlet, a shop, where they just bought a whole lot of things. It was a wonderful experience for me. Yes.
Ma'am, you're a true traditionalist, loving all things ancient, be it craft, textiles, food, or even people. So can you highlight why Kanchipuram became famous for our Kanjivarams, and do you consider it a truly cottage industry?
Now, Kanchipuram, really, you might be surprised to know that the saris are not woven in Kanchipuram itself. It's something like everyone talks about Hyderabad pearls, but that's not the origin of the place. Yeah. So Kanchipuram, all the looms are outside. And why Kanchipuram became a center is because of the temples. So certain saris were woven for the deities, special saris. And then they replicated the designs and started making more. And then they found that Kanchipuram was the nearest little town that could sell the saris. So they started stocking the saris there. That's how it became a very big center. Unfortunately, all that has changed now. And it was a dusty town where there was no hotel. And when we went to Kanchipuram, you know, only now Saravana Bhavan and hotels like that have come. We used to just go in the morning and we used to return by evening because you couldn't really stay on. Everything was dusty. Then after a few years, like I saw, there were Mercedes-Benz and Toyotas and name it, it was there, and hotels started springing up because it became the hub of the silk industry. It was, Kanchipuram was known as the silk city. But I'm sad to say that when many people, when their children are getting married, they ask me, where should I go in Kanchipuram to buy saris? Initially, I used to dissuade them. I used to say the best saris you can get are in Chennai, because the shop people take away these saris. They have their own looms there. So it is not what it was. A few people who had broken away from Kalakshetra, they used to design beautiful saris. Like they designed for my daughter when she got married, for my daughter-in-law. But it is not the same. But they go back, they go and come back and say, you're right. Just because they would get a 300 rupee discount, which was not really worth the ride, because you don't get that variety there at all. And now I've stopped telling them because a wedding is not complete without a trip to Kanchipuram. So I always say, go to the temples, pray and come back.
Yes. I think for our things with our friends, we've been to Kanchipuram. With me, for both her daughters' wedding, we had gone to Kanchipuram. And
can I play the video now?
Yeah. I think you can play the video, Shelja, for Kanchipuram.
Yeah.
This is just a clip, a short one. I mean, the original is much
just
longer.
Runs 1 minute, but gives a wonderful intro to you, ma'am.
Kanchipuram is known as a city of 1,000 temples, famous for its legendary silk saris and its temples. And religion and weaving have always been melded together. Kanchipuram has been known as a city of 1,000 temples. There are temples everywhere, and it's also known for its legendary silk sarees. See, one would imagine that Kanchipuram silks has always been there from time immemorial. Actually, it was cotton weaving which was predominant in Kanchipuram. Silk only came about, say, 400 years ago. It's all so difficult because in the old days, it was just oral tradition passed on from father to son. Nothing was documented. So research was done through talking to old weavers, talking to people in the trade, and so on. One very interesting fact is that the weavers consider themselves descendants of sage Markandeya. Sage Markandeya, when he was very young, from an early age, worshipped Lord Shiva.
Okay, done, Sujata?
Yes. So, ma'am, how was it a total household getting involved in these Kanjipuram silks? It was almost like a cottage industry where the wife, the children, the parents, everybody is involved along with the weaver.
I'll tell you that if you visit Kanchipuram, you go to every house and the loom will occupy center stage. The biggest room in the house would be devoted to the loom, and all other activities would move around the loom. Sometimes you'd see little children, the family, the kids would sleep under the loom because it's cool, you know. And the women did ancillary jobs. They used to do the spinning, they used to wash the warp and starch it and all those sort of things. And they had the kitchen close by, and in the open courtyard, they used to assist the husbands. But they never sat at the looms. All that is changing now. And this is true of South India, except in the Northeast, where the women wear these backstrap looms, and they are the ones who weave actually the textiles. Yeah. So it is a household industry. It is a cottage industry. And I always pray that it will continue forever, because one just cannot lose the handlooms.
But nowadays, the children are not helping the parents who are involved with weaving. So has some way that has helped or that has deteriorated the industry?
See, what happened is in 1986, the child labor law was passed, that no child should be allowed to come anywhere near the loom or to weave or to engage in any craft, even if it was their own parents. So once when I went to Kanchipuram to do some research, the women said, and the men also, they said that this is the death of handlooms, because the child, right from the time he's a toddler, he runs around, touches the loom, you know, he's used to the music of the loom, he listens to his parents, and he knows exactly what goes on. And then, you know, because their fingers are slender and they're small, they could throw the shuttle also. They used to help. It's such a wonderful experience looking at them. But after this, they were not allowed to come near the loom. They were shooed off. And one family told me that they were fined 500 rupees. This is some 15 years ago. 500 rupees is a lot of money for the child coming near the loom to ask the mother something and to touch the loom. Somebody found out and reported. So what happened is they lost one member of the family. So the children lost interest in the loom because they knew nothing about weaving. So that has also led to deterioration, you know. And now we are trying to, in Kalakshetra, we try to introduce courses for young weavers. We offer them stipends, we offer them a place to stay, and even subsidized food. But you won't believe, we didn't get a single application. The application came from people like you and me. So that was a good thing.
And you've recently published this book, ma'am, The Looms of Arivur.
Yeah.
It is very close to your heart. Yes. Through these documentations, you're helping to preserve the history of the textiles. Could you please give us some highlights about the Looms of Arivur, as well as how the Kodaluri Karupur Sari revival story, ma'am?
Okay, there are two long stories now for me to tell you. One is, you know, about the time when my career was at its peak. You know, I know what was happening to the weavers. The wages had come down, and the people who employed them were exploiting them. The middlemen took over, and so on. And what they started doing is, when they introduced polyester fiber, they found it much easier to, weave. And I'm sure that all of you at some time have seen these polycot saris. They are beautiful. I'm not saying that they were ugly, because if they were woven with soft yarn, they look very nice. But then people like me who get, you get so upset at wearing anything synthetic. It goes against the grain. So what happened was the weavers were in penury, and they were doing the free dhoti sari scheme, where they were just, doing it. And to me, I felt that was an overkill, because people who received these free dhotis and saris didn't appreciate them at all. So what happened is there was a big dip, and the weavers went through hell. I cannot tell you, extreme poverty. So I wrote a play, because I found that I couldn't wage a lone battle. I couldn't get group of people who wanted to revive handlooms. So I wrote a play which was staged by the Madras Players, and it had a very successful run, and we wanted to take it across India to keep people aware of this. In fact, there were all moist eyes at the end of the play. Many people came up and asked me what they could do for textiles. So we thought we'll do it, and then the economy took a nosedive, and our sponsors backed out. So I did the next best thing by writing a book based on the play.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it is fiction, but there are true incidents in it, and I didn't want to make it, completely true to life, because I might get into trouble at things. But then many people will read it and know what happened. And actually, the gentleman you saw in those pictures, Mr. Shankar, IS officer, who was in Co-optex, and he did a lot for handlooms. And so he knew what I was writing about. So sadly, just when it was launched, and Hindu gave a very good review of the book, and I was getting people who called and wanted the book. COVID
happened, yeah.
So
I think you launched it in February, ma'am.
In January and February. We had 2 launches. Yes, one was at the Madras Book Club, and the other one was Madras Literary Society. So that sort of thing collapsed, and even now I have a lot of books. So anytime anyone wants an autographed copy, I send it by courier, because I want people to be aware. I want people to understand what happened. And it's true what the weavers went through. They were committing suicide. Yeah.
Even the Song of the Loom, your theatre production, ma'am, was very, very well appreciated. I think you did about 2-3 shows of it with the Madras Players. And it actually compelled the viewers to think that it is for saving the weavers.
Yeah. But unfortunately, Sujata, what happens is public memory is very short. When they're watching a play or say a movie, you get so, you get so angry with the way things are. You want to do something. But if things are not done immediately, everything sort of slows down. In fact, when we went to Calcutta, I saw Naziruddin Shah sitting across the table, and I went up to him and talked to him, and he was very friendly. And I told him, I have this play script. Would you put it up in Bombay? He said, sure, just send me the script, Sabita. I'll see. But then, of course, it was forgotten. And I'm not one to push myself or keep asking. In fact, I've written a book on Indian textiles, which is mainly for the lay person to identify the textiles, to give a little bit of the history. So that is again lying in the back burner, because I've yet to find a publisher. And I'm telling you, the hardest thing for a writer is to find a publisher. No matter what, the search, it's almost like having a baby. You go and search and find, and yeah.
Is it the Raga of the Loom, ma'am, which is waiting for publication? That's the one.
Yes. In fact, I have a lot of beautiful pictures as well. But now publishing industry is in a bad way. They're only, in fact, one of my Kerala books are caught up there, and we haven't really brought it out. We were going to launch it in Savera. All the shots were done in Savera Hotel in the kitchen, and it's all ready. And so Rolly Books have told me, don't worry, in a matter of months, we think COVID will pass and we'll have a lovely launch. Yeah. So
And
that,
how can designers help us to revive these traditional weaves? Like Sabyasachi has used the Madurai Sungudi, which is the native textile of Madurai. And of course, Lakme Fashion Week has also come forward to help us with the weavers. How has Co-optex helped, and how can more designers help?
see, the designers, they are very good from NID and NIFT and all. They are quite good. But what happens is they go very contemporary. You know, they should also use some of the traditional skills to make contemporary designs. That's what I keep telling them. Once we did a collection, that was again when I was Crafts Council in Kanchipuram. I went along with an NID designer, and both of us went there. All we did was to design just stripes and checks. And Co-optex took up the marketing for it. We sold every single sari. Now today the same thing has come, and it's called the lungi sari because it's inspired by the lungis.
Yeah.
Co-optex, I can give you two names. See, Ratija, when she was there, they did the Pudupavu, which was beautiful. They had small little borders, and they were selling at 75 rupees for a very fine cotton sarees. They were woven in South India. So many times I ask for a revival like that. So it's people at the head who make things, you know, move. And now we have Mr. Venkatesh, who is also very good. His passion is there for textiles, and he goes into pockets and, you know, recreates the old designs and things like that. So we
And I think,
like,
yes.
you know.
And at Co-optex, I think they are making the effort of tagging each sari with the details about the sari.
Yes. And also about the weaver, which
Yes.
is a great thing. See, most people and most shops which are selling the saris, they don't want to let out their trade secrets. So they will not give the name, divulge the name of the weaver. But here now we're doing it. And I think it's all thanks to the effort of Mr. Venkatesh to have done that. Yeah.
And I know, ma'am, the Kanjivarams are your favorite, the Pattu saris are your favorite. What are you doing for the Kanjivaram Korovais to be eternal? How are you helping on that? There's a story on that, ma'am, I would like you to share also.
Okay, about 8 years ago, you know, these Korvai saris had disappeared. And incidentally, Korvais, you know, in case people don't know what it is the border is solid, the body is solid, and the pallu is solid. The warp doesn't run in, the weft doesn't run into the warp. Like what you're wearing is a Korvai sari.
Yeah, yeah.
And the joinery is done on the loom. So it's beautiful. But that kindly, you know, went off. Now the second sari is, yeah, that's a Korvai. The next one is also a Korvai, and that design has been given by me. Yeah. So what happened is, I remember walking into Sundri Silks, and Mr. Rajaram and I are very good friends. And he said, Akka, you will never be able to get a Korvai sari done. Not in your lifetime, not in your grandchildren's. It's just gone out. I said, shall we take a bet on that? He said, okay, we'll take a bet. You'll never be able to do it. So I used to go and find weavers and ask them, can you weave traditional Korvai for me? And the answer would be, Illama, romba kashtam, illa. Immediately a refusal. Because you feel quite upset. Then one fine day, my friend Rajam Subramaniam who's I think here in the meeting, she sent this boy to come and meet me. And he was all of just 23, 24, very young, raw, shy. He wouldn't look you in the face, diffident. And then I asked him, I said, Vijay, can you weave Korvai? I'll give you a sample. Can you do it? Immediately he said, Mudiyo ma, Mudiyo. Incidentally, these are all his saris. And I can't tell you the way he's evolved. From a shy youngster, he wears now jeans and tucked in shirts, and then he's got his own line. And then I said, see, I won't be hand holding you anymore, because we used to sit for hours talking designs and telling him, and he would not move one foot without asking me. He used to say, can I do this? Can I do that? So I helped him with marketing, helped him with designs and colors and so on. And today I'm proud to see where he is now. Even now, he is also suffering. though he has trained clusters in the art of Korwe weaving and brought it back in a big way, it is sad that after COVID, he's finding it very difficult to sell his saris and they are expensive. So I told him to start marketing cotton saris, which I think he's doing now. So I feel happy that in a way I was part of the revival of Korwe, because this family, Vijay is an 8th generation weaver from Tanjavur. They were doing Korwes once upon a time. Then they said, no, anything sells, So they went back to weaving ordinary saris. So their skills were there.
Yes. Ma'am, I remember when I was catching up with you, you were mentioning that during lockdown, you wanted to help the weavers. So what did the weavers say about your help at that moment?
See, what happened, I said I will start in the south. Though I was getting messages from Calcutta, from Bihar, a lot of weavers. You can't just do everything, and I always feel that if we have a band of people, it makes it easier, a group. So I said, okay, let me do what I can do on my own. So I decided on helping 3 clusters. One is from Arni, and then one is from Anakaputtur, and one is from Jalakandapuram. So 3 weavers. I've sent you the slides of what they produce. And they have a lot of stocks which is unsold. So I said, I'll apply for a grant to give you money, and I know you're starving. So would you want money for food? They said, we don't want money for food. We want money for raw material. I said, what are you going to do with raw material? We will weave. Because you are the one who always told us, keep giving the weavers work. If you don't give them work, they will go away and you will never get them again. We lose our heritage skills. I said, when you weave, what will you do with the saris? You'll sell them. How? You will sell them for us. It goes back at me. And so what I've done is, I've asked them, see, none of them are really tech savvy. They just know how to take pictures on their mobile, but I've encouraged them to send them to me. I've sent these saris pictures to all my friends. If they like any sari, they used to send the pictures back to me, and I would identify the weaver, give them the weaver's phone number, and once you make the payment, these people courier the saris. We've sold about, I've sold 40 to 50 saris. Now what you see are all like, these are from a person in Anakaputtur, and he's weaving in bamboo, jute, banana fiber, and the saris are soft. I actually haven't acquired one myself, but my friends told me that it's very nice. And they are priced at, say, 1,500, 1,800, they are in this range. And people look at it as a donation. They don't even care if the sari comes to them or not, but it does. Because these people whom I've chosen to be head of clusters are all very, very responsible people, and they have high integrity. Yes. So far, they've never let anyone down. So this way you can have a direct dialogue with the weavers. Yeah.
I think that if anybody is interested in any of the saris which we were showing today, we can get in touch with the weaver along with ma'am. So the Duchess organizers, the heads of the groups, can facilitate this for you.
There were other saris also.
Yes, Shailaja, there are some more. Could you show them? The second cluster. Okay, ma'am, by the time she's getting to it.
I'm just getting them. You keep talking, yeah. I will.
Yeah. So, ma'am, you've documented heritage recipes from the South Indian communities in your cookbook, Annapurni, and various others. And you say, we are what we eat. So how do you collect and document these, ma'am?
Well, what I did was, actually, I was commissioned to do traditional recipes of 4 different states, and I always thought it was appalling that we have never bothered to keep the recipes our mothers have taught us. When I was in Bhopal, I used this one is from Arni. This weaver is a master weaver, and he's just excellent, and he can weave anything, any design that I give him, he can weave. And these are only about 850 rupees. People have bought them and made them into kaftans and skirts. Designers have bought them. Yeah. So, okay. So All these are his designs. And he's also doing that first two that you see. This is like a replication of Madurai Coronat saris. If you move back the slide, I will show you. Yeah, no, the ones with the checks, they are in silk. Yeah, this one. We used to call them Kaal Erangana Poda because the lines come right through. They look very stark and simple, but they are exquisite. And they're a mixture of silk and cotton. So you can wear them either in the Madras summer or in the Madras winter, if there's one. So very comfortable saris. Yeah, see, these are just done with stripes, but they're so effective and so beautiful, and they are a little coarse.
Beautiful colors also.
Yeah, and I keep giving him the colors. Yeah, this is a puja sari, which again he has done. No, this one is from Jalakandapuram. You know, this gentleman works with natural dyes. So whatever you see there, and it's very rare that a cotton sari has a woven pallu like this. So what you've seen are these 3 clusters that I am now helping and you know, selling their stock and trying to get grants for them.
Okay.
This is the Ayram Butta which went out. It's very difficult to weave, but it's been revived again. Some of them have tried to print on them also. But even here, I've assured them that once, if the grant comes through, God willing, I will help them with designs and, you know, try to make it more sophisticated to suit the market. These are all done by them. It's all their designs and their colors.
Okay, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Coming back to the food thing,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
found that you know, we lived in Bhopal when we got married, and there was no. We didn't even have a telephone at home. The telephone we had to put a distance. So I used to write to my mother, please send this recipe. It will take about 15-20 days for my letter to go and then for hers to come. And I collected a lot of haldi smeared, curry smeared papers. Then it occurred to me that I should document all the recipes because of traditional cooking was fabulous. So I got this, somebody commissioned me to do the 4 southern states. So I said I'd start with my south, my mother, because she lives with us. So that's how Aharam was born. And it had all traditional recipes. Then Annapurni was my latest. That done by Roli Books. And that also has Tamilian cuisine from various communities, not just thing. And a large part of it is Mudiyas, since I am a Mudiya, so, you know, all that has been incorporated. I've included even Muslim Tamils in that, in the book.
Ma'am, your life experience actually urged you to start Udavi, a volunteer-based service that offers companionship and help to the elderly. Loneliness at the old age is the most difficult thing in life. And how did the elderly manage during this lockdown, ma'am? And how did you get to the idea of starting Udavi?
It's because, Sujata, all my life I had dealt with old people. My father was a doctor, and at the last stage of his life, he brought in people who were abandoned by not abandoned, who had left, you know, their parents to seek greener pastures abroad, which is now true even now. So he took them in, and we as children were taught to read to them and incorporate them as a family, you know, and so that was a very nice thing. So I wanted to do something for the elder. I wanted to do something in my daughter's name after she passed away, because she used to do a lot for the elderly. So I was thinking, you know, whether I should do theater because it was very good, debate, a cup, or something like that. Then it suddenly occurred to me, why don't I do something for the elderly? And again, I couldn't do it alone. So I visited a shop called Oldest here, which offers accessories for the older people. And they were inspired to start the shop because of their respective mothers being ill and they couldn't get accessories. So they were the first to come on board, Sanjay and Jayashree. They came on board and they immediately said yes. Then we started framing, framing the constitution and things like that. So we see this gentleman in blue that you see. is Indira Parthasarathi, famous writer, Sahitya Academy Award winner. And the child who's playing the guitar, you know who she is. She's the daughter of...
Sorry, I'll get it back.
It was my daughter. It was my daughter who was playing the guitar, and I think this was at the launch of Udduvi, ma'am.
Yeah, this was one of the first cultural events we had, and I happened to sort of run into Nina, and she said, "Why don't you have it in Savera?" So we had it there, and it was such a memorable event. And Nina asked me, she said, "What do I serve people, you know, for tea?" I said, "Nina, give them anything, because once in a way, just let them have fun and, you know, eat what they like, because all the time they're living through restrictions." So they always enjoyed yeah. So what you asked me, what we are doing for the elders, we visit them at home. And loneliness, as you said, is one of the worst things one can encounter. You can be lonely in a crowd. Some of them live with their children, but they're still lonely. They say their children are preoccupied by, you know, with the computers and mobile phones. They don't have time. So we formed a set of rules, and I handpicked my core group, because I told them this is not a glamorous organization. If you have passion for elders, you might even get disturbed or depressed when you meet them. But your idea is just here. And you won't believe that so many of them have called back and said that, you know, Udduvi has made a change in their lives. And we brought out 2 or 3 people who were in depression. Because depression can turn clinical. When it turns clinical, then you need drugs. It takes a long time to come out of it. So all we do is to dispel loneliness, take them out, take them to the temple, take them for a walk. And we are always looking for volunteers, because we are short of volunteers. And what happens is the core group themselves have to, you know, do all the work. So we just require, say, once in 2 months, 2 hours of your time. So any of you are willing to sign up, we'll be very happy. So
thank you, ma'am. I'm sure some of our Duchess would come forward to help you in your awesome Udduvi which you have created. And we do have some questions, ma'am, from a few of our members. Shailaja, could you spotlight on Saida? Shailaja?
I am. Sorry.
Yes,
I was
she's here.
muted.
Yeah, she's here.
Saida, can you open out your video? Can you open your video? Then you'll come on the screen and then, yes.
Please unmute yourself. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Saida.
So, Sabita ma'am, we met before once. Just had a question to ask you. We are all realizing how cherished our heritage is and trying to go back to it. We are doing something similar in Hyderabad, me and a couple of my cousins. I want to know if there's any advice from you about, from your own experiences about how to go forward, how to reach out to people and how to showcase our heritage there.
Hyderabad is one of the most, Andhra is one of the very beautiful and wonderful centers where it has not suffered much like in the south. I always used to tell Usrama and Jaya Jetli, Laila Tyagi and all that, because it's a place where, I don't know, things seem to have gone on forever. Like take your Ikats and take your Champalis, take your Narayan Pet saris and so on. They seem, Gadwals have underwent a sea change. They are not the same kind of Gadwals that I used to wear and love. They're different now. They've changed in character. Like, you know, it's a sense of evolving, I'm sure. But you don't have the problems that we face where we are losing traditional weavers. You know, you're still able to. Murli Sari House, that, you know, the Telia Rumal, which when I first encountered him, he was a very small guy. And the Telia Rumals I saw there were all lying in pieces. And I said, look, why don't we make them into saris? So he said, yes, Ma, it's already been done for the Festival of India. Kopul Jaikar and Matan Singh have come and given us orders. but he has not gone back. I mean, he just zoomed ahead and is selling, and he never suffered. So, but I'm sure you can locate pockets where weaving is not doing so well. And you have to sort of score the countryside to find out which weaver needs help. Don't go to the people who are doing well. Try to uplift the weaver who is suffering. And for that, you have to do a lot of research. I'm sure there are a lot of places that you can go and find out, you know. If you want help, I can also locate and let you know. But here, you and I need to have a personal one-to-one discussion on this.
Yes, I think we should do that. And thank you for mentioning Uzrama. I'm wearing one of her sarees actually. I'm wearing a Malka just now.
That you're wearing such a beautiful saree. It's a weave, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, that's a khadi weave, and it is her passion, Uzrama's passion. I don't know if you know about Malka, but she started it as a corporate. So that's the pallu.
It's beautiful.
And this is the sari. It doesn't need ironing. I just wash it in the washing machine. It doesn't need any maintenance.
But only thing I have against Malka fabrics is it's coarse to use for say a kurta or a kaftan and things like that. And it fades very fast. You have to take real care. I wouldn't put my Malka fabric in a washing machine. I will hand wash it, and I put it right in the shade.
Yeah.
This sarees worked very well. So maybe it's a different material. I'll ask her. There are some softer materials also.
Yeah, okay. Whatever has been sold here in one of the Kalakshetra fairs, they always have thick, coarse material. It's beautiful, no doubt. But it
give her that feedback. I'm sure she will look into it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Thank you, Saida. We have another question from Anu Agarwal.
Anu can, open out your video and unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
No, we can hear you.
Yeah, ma'am, before I come to the question, I want to tell you I was just going through the chat. Some of our members are already volunteering to help in the Udhavi, ma'am. So that's really good. So now coming to the question, I wanted to ask you, ma'am, how do you maintain your Kanjivaram saris? And is there any difference in maintaining the older ones and the newer ones?
See, in the old days, no one wore a Kanjivaram sari new. Like my mother always used to, when you buy a Kanjivaram, give it one dip in water, but that breaks. It used to break my heart also to see a new sari. You know, you want to wear it and it's beautiful and glossy, you know, to dip it in water. But she says that's the only way you can preserve the saris. So, and they also used to wash it with that pungang kotta, you know, that like shikakai nut, there was a special. And it used to lather very well. They only washed it in that. And later on, we started using Lux flakes. Lux went out. Then Gentile is there. And you must never soak a sari. And when it touches water, I'll tell you why they say you must put it into water. Because it removes the starch. And it's the starch that kills your saris. If you hang up your saris, you'll see the starch eats into it and you'll just get it there. And how we preserve our saris is wrong. We always put it on hangers. The best way to preserve a sari is to roll it. And now I hear that the people who make furniture are making sari cupboards where, you know, there's a sort of long rod. It facilitates the rolling of the saris and keep it there. We used to roll it in veshtis, very soft material, and push it in. But it's not practical. I mean, how many saris can you put that way? So if you need to, if you're just hanging your saris, please take them out at regular intervals, because they also need to have fresh air and they want you to see them, and, you know, tucked away in the cupboards doesn't do them good. Take them out. Use one day to remove all your saris, spread them on the cot, air them, because perspiration also spoils them. You want to care for your saris and want them to live. These are things you must.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Because the older saris used to be really thick, like, you know, the fabric used to be thick. So they were like, you know, I myself still have a 30-year-old Kanjivaram with me. Yes, ma'am. The one which I'm wearing also is it's nearly 40 years, ma'am.
And not
so like, yeah, but some of them do get like, torn off. So I was wondering what is the other ways to keep them preserved.
No,
The one I'm wearing is about 35, 36 years old, ma'am.
Wonderful. And the old sarees are so beautiful. They are
So
warm.
beautiful. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Anu.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Jata,
Yes, Shailja.
before we proceed, I just want to bring to notice two things. So, can you please mention again about how they can get the books? Because some people are asking about getting the books. Somebody else wanted to know about Ahimsa Silk, and there is a Korvai weaver who's given his contact number. So, Ms. Savita can also say how you can, how they can be connected. Sujata, you can highlight that one.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, see, what you do is, Sujata has my WhatsApp number.
Yes.
You just send me a message on WhatsApp saying what you want. You tell me. So I will immediately give you the name of the weaver, his telephone number, and after that you're on directly. From the weaver, it will go to the wearer straight.
Okay, ma'am.
I don't have to come in the way.
Thank you, ma'am. And what about the books, ma'am, if they want the Tales of Ariwood?
The books also, what you do is you just send me a message on WhatsApp or Messenger or whatever you like, and I will tell you the book costs very little. I think it's about 250 or something, plus the courier charges.
Okay, ma'am.
Once that comes to my account, I'll start couriering them.
Okay.
And I'll autograph them for you.
Thank
Sujata,
you.
Sujata,
Yeah.
one person, Vijay Ganesh has shared his number also. I guess
Yes, I saw that. I saw that. Vijay Ganesh has joined our meeting today, ma'am.
I sent them all invitations, all the weavers, but I don't know how many have joined.
Yeah, so Vijay Ganesh is there, and he did say that he is the Koruvai designer, and he's given his number on the chat also, which I'll share it with the others also.
Okay, that's great.
So, ma'am, what's your final message for all our members and viewers? Because we have such intricate hand-woven saris throughout India, and it's our national pride. So, what would you like to give a message as a message to all of them?
Wear saris at least once a month, because then your saris will tear and you want to buy more. And also appreciate what goes into the saris. Like, I take many people to the weaving centers. I usually go to Kalakshetra because the entire weaving is there, and we show them how it's done. And then they say, wow, this much goes into a sari.
Yes.
So it's not just the foreigner who comes, who might take, but it's also Indians who want to know about the sari.
Yes.
And if you ever go to Tanjavur, you can take Vijay's contact, because he's got a full setup there, and he'll show you a variety of things and how things are woven. You know, you'll get into the heart of the matter.
We had taken our Duchess members to Kalakshetra, and we showed them all the looms which are there in that particular area which is demarked for them. And they had gone through the weaving procedure and learnt about it over there.
I'm glad about that, because it is a learning curve for all of us. All people.
Yes, yes, ma'am. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. It was fantastic conversing with you.
It was
And
lovely talking to you too.
it was beautiful. Can we have Uma Muthuswamy, please?
Uma, can you raise your hand or open out your video, please?
Yeah, I just asked her to. There she is. Start your video, Uma. Yeah.
Sujata and Sabita, that was a delightful morning. Wonderful conversation, flowing so easily and giving us such a deep insight into all your achievements and contributions. I think our heads are all spinning as to the kind of things that you have done. And I'm sure you're going to continue to do many more things.
Yes, I hope to die with my boots on.
To handloom, to now your Udavi. It's wonderful, wonderful. And it is a privilege and honor to have you with us today as our guest, especially that we have just celebrated National Handloom Day on August 7th. So it's very apt. And today we see so many young girls wearing handlooms with pride and joy. And I think you have contributed a lot to that. There was a time when people were not wearing saris at all. That whole sari revival, you played a key role in that. And we should all be thankful for it. So thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing your very rich knowledge and for spending so much with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Uma. And I think I'm privileged to come and share something with you all. And you've been very kind, and it's been a lovely audience. So thank you so much, and keep doing things during COVID. That's my message.
My sister, who's a Supreme Court lawyer, she used to buy all her court saris from you, Amrapali. Black and white saris, but all from you, Sabita. Sita.
I knew when I went to Delhi, she used to buy.
Yeah, she used to come to Madras just to buy your saris.
Nice. Those were the days, yes. But these are the days too, and keep being active. Keep doing something productive and keep giving, because whenever you give, you'll never feel depressed or lonely or sad. It gives you the greatest pleasure in life. Yeah. So on that note, I'll take your leave, and thank you, Sujata, for being such a wonderful interviewer.
Thank you.
All of you. Thank Neena, and thank all the lovely
Neena, Neena is there.
Did you picture with Sabita, Sujata?
Yeah, we have to take a picture. Can everybody switch on their cameras? Can everybody switch on their videos? Sorry. Shailaja?
Yes, I will. But I'm not unmuting all now, right now. Later, right?
Yeah. Don't unmute all. Rati and Anu Sachdev, would you like to say something?
Can I go?
Yes, Anu, please go.
Ma'am, my journey from college started with Amrapali, and since then I've never been looking back. I enjoy my handlooms and cottons, and I just love to wear them. Thank you, ma'am, for such a inspirational talk, enriching my life too. Thank you, ma'am.
So wonderful.
Rati?
Rati?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes.
Hi, Sabita.
Hey, Rati.
Nice connecting with you, Sabita. It's been quite a while.
It was back many years, and we're still connected.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. Wonderful. You're so passionate about what you do, and there's so much that you did for textiles and handlooms. And like Anu said, I remember way back in the 80s coming to, Amrapali and buying my saris. Not my first sari. I think the second or third sari, I remember buying it from you. Because the first sari, Neelu got it for me from Neena's exhibition. So, it goes back a long way, and I'm looking forward to reading your latest book. Thank you so much, Savita.
Thank you.
Can we take a picture, screenshot, please? Everybody look into the camera.
There are a couple of people who have not.
Yes, I've sent them the request, but they haven't.
Yeah, I've been sending them.
Yeah.
So everybody can. Yes.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.